Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this video is about Donald Trump's chances of being re-elected because we're in the home straight now, only 2.5 weeks to go. So Trump is proving himself to be a cockwomble yet again. Today, lambasting world experts on coronavirus as idiots. Now, he might be using this in something like a metaphorical sense, but who's really an idiot? Trump with his abysmal educational record, school transcript so shameful that decades after he finished school, somehow graduated, he has striven might and main to keep it a closely guarded secret. So this is part of his all-out assault on truth, the war on objectivity, on assessing data, the plain truth about ways that coronavirus can be mitigated. No, we can't kill it stone dead, but there are ways we can reduce the spread of it. Now, there's this absolutist fallacy a lot of people fall for. Because we can't absolutely guarantee that coronavirus won't spread if we wear a mask. Oh, in that case, there's no point wearing it at all. Of course there's a point if you lower the risk very substantially. Anyway, so I'm hoping Trump will face condign retribution at the poll, but don't want to get my hopes up too much. The polar polls, if you look about 10 of them, shows Biden on average 6% ahead, and that's too close for comfort. You know, there's a margin of error in there. Let's say there was a 2 percentage point margin of error again, and it's really in favor of Trump's opponent like last time, and that really Biden's not 6% ahead, but 4% ahead. He'd be quite likely to win at that point. Okay, 2.5 weeks to go. Anything can happen at backgammon. But really, almost everybody has made up his or her mind by this late stage. It's getting too late for October surprise. I thought Trump was going to say, we have the vaccine now. Well, he might say it tomorrow. You never know. Because you can't guarantee that. And he would announce one even if there isn't one, even if it's not safe, if he can get a few renegade scientists to try and sign off on it. You know, this vaccine seems to be his hope, which is richly ironic considering he has more than flirted with the anti-vaxxer movement. And of course, if they somehow manage to push through a vaccine which isn't quite safe and is only semi-effectual, that will simply grist to the mill of the anti-vaxxer movement. You see, if there are really bad side effects, if some people die as a result of it, and if it's not that successful at protecting people against coronavirus. So always try to politicize decisions which should be made on the basis of statistics. So it appeared to be a karmic moment when Trump himself contracted coronavirus. He being the super spreader in chief, he's done so much to actively promote the virus, holding rallies against expert advice, and I think against state laws as well. I don't know how on earth he's escaped prosecution for this. All his life, he seems to be immune from prosecution for the most flagrant breaches of the criminal law, his fraud over Trump University and so on. So he thought he was invulnerable, and he was almost brought low by coronavirus. Lord Acton said that power tends to corrupt. It tends to corrupt, rot his mind in this particular case. And I read this fascinating study in the Atlantic magazine about a week ago about the cognitive effects of might and puissant people, how they're unable to read faces or to gauge the emotional reaction, and they tend to just shut down discordant voices, just be unwilling to assess alternative viewpoints, to consider that they might be mistaken, plunging headlong in the wrong direction sometimes. Lord Owen, the British politician who was leader of the SDP, was the British Foreign Secretary, a psychiatrist, and he's published an absolutely fascinating book on the subject, and Trump is really a textbook case of that. Obviously, Trump, who wasn't clever in the first place, who wasn't dispassionate about things, and that's where he moves his base. They're not sure what they think, but they know how they feel about an issue, what's good and who's bad. You know, you're with us or against us. It's a very Manichaean worldview. There are allies and there are enemies, and there's not much middle ground. They don't take a considered view of things. So the Democrats are at least the reality-based community. They say in the United Kingdom that no Prime Minister leaves Downing Street entirely sane, and perhaps the same is true in the United States. I mean, I think Obama kept his feet on the ground, had to remain dignified to keep his cool under fire, even when the foulest aspersions were cast upon his character. Trump, who simply explodes at being subjected to a reasonable question, says it's a very nasty question, and particularly can't take it if a woman asks him a worthwhile question. But this doesn't seem to have hurt him in the polls that much, and bizarrely, him catching coronavirus made him a little bit more popular, some sympathy. But you think that should have reminded people of his mortality, of just how infirm he is. A very obese man, age 74, who eats junk food. Whereas, Obama, I know he's 77, but takes some exercise, he's not overweight, and I don't think he eats unhealthily. So surely Biden is much healthier, even though he's slightly older. Okay, and there are concerns about Biden's health as well. What terrifies me is Biden might suddenly collapse and get coronavirus or something like that. So Trump has always suffered from a complete dearth of empathy and been purblind to the emotions of others, completely indifferent to the deaths of 220,000 Americans now, and unwilling to accept alternative perspectives. But obviously the situation is even worse now that he's president and he's clearly got pre-Alzheimer's. His cognitive declension is in an advanced state. So he's doing everything he could to spread it. Again, if I didn't know better, I think he actually wanted as many people as possible to die of it. He surrounded himself with toadies, and that creates the echo chamber, which has simply served to reinforce his numerous delusions. But him catching coronavirus appeared to be poetic justice. It obviously would be deeply gratifying if he was felled by the disease that he's done so much to spread to other people. And so many people in his circle got it. I think 18 people in his circle got it. And what's the death rate from coronavirus in the United States? It's quite low now, something like 3%. So maybe none of those 18 will die. Some of them aren't that old. But Trump has always disregarded medical advice, has scorned scorned Biden for wearing masks, and gone directly against what the experts have told him to do, and set a really shocking example. There's someone who really doesn't have the mental equipment to handle this, really the worst possible person you could have in charge when there's a crisis of such magnitude. So the doctors and the White House contradict each other, and just like when Trump went into hospital, we're unclear when he actually caught it, when he tested positive. It seems he may have tested positive rather before they said, but simply because his health deteriorated so much, that's why they sent him into hospital. So he's still there at the White House, spreading around to other people, despite knowing he had it. His wife and his child Barron caught it. So, and then we went to that medical center. The Reed Hospital, I think it was, the medical center in the White House, was unable to cope with his condition. It was that serious. And then he took this totally unnecessary drive to greet his supporters, thereby exposing the Secret Service agents and his driver to it. And remember, they don't open the windows, so all the air is circulating there. I know they're wearing masks, and so is he, but there's still some sort of risk. Now, I know doctors and nurses come close to him. They're wearing masks, so there is a risk there, but that's unavoidable. This drive in the car was totally avoidable. And so there he was. He could have actually killed a Secret Service agent and driver by putting him at risk for no good reason. So it's just appalling. It's just an insult to the intelligence of every person around. And then he says it's a blessing to have it. How offensive to those who've caught this disease, who've suffered terribly, who've died. Some of them have survived but may have lifelong health effects. Others who've not even suffered that badly will have been frightened by it, shaken by it, the possibility that you could die, and what a horrific way to go, not being able to breathe. So he's got the medical care that he prevents other people from having, and it's funded by taxation, which he boasts that he's too smart to pay because of these massive write-offs for his huge business losses. So much for his reputation as a man with unexampled commercial acumen. Anyway, his insouciance about coronavirus passes for machismo in certain circles. Anyway, with typical hyperbole and, frankly, dishonesty, he was saying it was going to disappear. Do you remember that? Do you remember by the 12th of March? He said by the 12th of March, it'll be close to zero. I think it's 8 million cases in the United States. 8 million. And he said it was going to be zero back in March. Wow. Could not have been more wrong if he tried. But, I mean, just how willfully stupid are some of his supporters to still back a man who lies and lies and lies almost ceaselessly, who is really just a stranger to reality, and who's just got it so badly wrong, who's done everything in his power to make it worse, to encourage people to do things that were going to kill them, like to inject bleach into their lungs. I'm flabbergasted. It really is baffling that tens of millions of people are going to put an X by his name, are putting their faith in Donald Trump after all the havoc he's wreaked on the United States and other countries. And then he's clearly worried he's going to lose. He suggested he might lose, might leave the country, wouldn't commit to accepting the results, and no presidential candidate before has ever said they wouldn't accept them in advance. So he's frightened, lashing out, calling Kamala Harris a monster, and what a horrid thing to call her. Now, I don't warm to her, but the person's really monstrosity is Trump. I don't think there's anything remotely monstrous about Miss Harris. So there are dog whistles about her disseminating these claims that she's not an American citizen. She doesn't have the right to be a vice president if elected. So this is sort of really birtherism Mark II, just the kind of scarcely veiled racist trope that he disseminated about Barack Obama several years ago, calling her communist without offering the slenderest evidence for that. I mean, she's a Democrat, not a particularly radical one. So this word communist, this branding reproach, is used to demonize anyone with even mildly left-wing or liberal views. Does she call for the confiscation of all private property? No, she certainly doesn't. She doesn't want the nationalization of anything. She doesn't want a one-party state. It's Trump who seems to want that. She's not an enemy of the free press. He's the enemy of the free press. She respects the judicial system. He does not. If anyone's closer to communist, it's him. I mean, I know he likes his private property, but he's totalitarian in his tendencies in every other way. He's the one who's got this fellow feeling for tyrants, who goes weak at the knees when he meets an oppressor. And he's envious of them, who fell in love, his own words, fell in love with Kim Jong-un, the cruelest despot on the planet. And Trump loves him. Really staggering. Republican presidents of the past, whatever their flaws, they were right on one thing. They opposed communist tyrants, and Trump adulates them. He views them as a role model. That is something to aspire to in Trump's view. Anyway, so Trump, who admires the Stalinist Putin and Xi in China, the president for life as he now is. So Trump is 100% behind their way of behaving. And no, he doesn't agree with them on every single action. So desperate times call for desperate measures. Trump may well lash out and bomb Iran. The United Nations arms embargo on Iran has expired today. And he might distract people. It'll lead to a slight uptick in the polls every time he dusts a nation with canister. But so far he held back from a confrontation with Iran, has been dialing it down since January. And Tucker Carlson, who appears to be his guru and his father confessor, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, amplified the message that don't start one of these wars, and that will redound to your discredit. But Trump might calculate that if he bombs them now, that'll have enough of a bounce in the polls to just get him over the edge on the 3rd of November. And that might even work, actually. So I hope he's not listening. But anyway, time is running out to change the tide. Apparently 100,000 ballots have been thrown out already. There was this allegation that some Trumpist postal worker threw out a bag of ballot papers. Presumably he didn't know who they were for. Obviously be a bit of a mixture. And Democrats vote significantly more by post than Republicans do. So the Republicans think if we can scupper postal voting as much as possible, that will work to their advantage. And they're probably right. So postal voting has been going on for some time. So army lawyers have been recruited by both sides. A bit of a psychological fillip to the Democrats that they've outraised the Republicans. So there could be an awful lot of legal challenges. Remember 2000, Al Gore versus George W. Bush. That went on for about a month. And it's not true that Bush won it by 500 votes in Florida. No. He won it by one vote in the Supreme Court, which is why Amy Coney Barrett getting in would make such a difference. Obviously, Republican-appointed judges are the majority on the bench of the United States Supreme Court, which is not to say they would necessarily vote in a partisan manner. And even if a Republican-voted judge rules the way the Republicans want, that doesn't prove that he or she is doing it for partisan reasons. Likewise, if a judge was appointed by a Democrat and he or she votes the way the Democrats would want, again, that doesn't prove he's doing it for political reasons, might be doing it for jurisprudential reasons. He's simply guided by reason and knowledge of the law and so forth. They could be doing it for partisan reasons, but we don't know. And you've got to come from somewhere. Everybody has opinions. Highly intelligent people who are gifted in the humanities, yeah, they would have given some thought to politics and they will have some views in it, but they might not be hyper partisan as Trump would have them be. And sadly, American politics is ever more polarized. There appears to be a massive and growing gulf between the two parties with a precious little middle ground. So Trump's attempts to defund the United States Postal Service might work, but obviously that'll have a deleterious effect on business. Some people won't get their medicines on time. And so he's willing to kill people by making them get their medicines late, so long as some votes get there too late after Election Day and can make sure that they're not counted. So Republicans have done everything they can, every low-down, dirty trick, skirting illegality and unconstitutionality to try and win elections. The Supreme Court ruled 5 times that in Texas, Republicans had changed electoral boundaries between the congressional districts with racially biased intent because whites are much more likely to vote Republican than non-whites in Texas to try to maximize their representation. The sort of gerrymandering goes back to Vice President of the United States, erstwhile governor of Massachusetts. The quantum governor was Elbridge Gerry, and so it's a portmanteau of Gerry as in his surname and salamander because he designed a constituency which was supposedly roughly in the shape of a salamander. Packing and cracking, a combination of those two techniques, as in to pack your opponent's supporters as densely as possible into one constituency and to crack your own, so that to distribute your support as efficiently as possible to maximize representation, and by contrast to distribute your opponent's support as inefficiently as possible. You can't prevent them winning any districts, but as few as possible, and that you'll win by just as little as you need, 51%. That might have been too thin a margin of error. Let's make it 55%. Even in a bad year, probably win that one. And try and have your opponents as close to 100% as possible one district. So yeah, they'll win that, but that's all they'll win. Anyway, so flagrant partisanship is the Republican way forward. Many low and underhand tricks, utterly dishonorable and unfair. Anyway, Trump is not so nonchalant now, but he's behaved in an utterly disgraceful manner, and so have many of his staffers. What the doctors in the hospital were saying and what the White House saying were different, but it seemed to be that he'd suborned a lot of those doctors there, and they were coming out very much with the Trump line that, oh yeah, he's rallying, he's ebullient, doing very well, and the White House sometimes contradicting that, so they just couldn't get their story straight. What a maladministration. They're not even efficient or competent at lying, but I suppose these people are presidential appointees, maybe some of those doctors. I don't know if he even has the power to fire them. They don't go out and lie for him, they're gone. A bit like that admiral who said he was really compos mentis a couple of years ago. I mean, as commander-in-chief, could he not fire the guy? I mean, obviously in the military, the default setting is to be deferential, that dissent is not looked upon favorably. That will not help your chances of promotion. If you do that, could that be insubordination? I don't know. Anyway, so I think Biden will win, not by very much. I'm not saying it's a certainty, but I give him say a 60% chance. You remember on election day, Hillary Clinton was 4 percentage points ahead in the opinion polls. Obviously, she won by 2% in the popular vote. So Biden's ahead by a bit more than that, but it obviously could still go wrong with him. And again, the national polls only tell you one picture. It's actually probably wiser to look at a state-by-state basis. But even looking at the key swing states, it looks like Biden's going to do it. So Trump is where he was in 2016 in a number of states, even higher in a couple. But that's obviously not helping him. He's got to win those ones like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, the blue wall, which went for Trump last time. The Republicans, they could lose Florida this time. People are saying they could lose Texas. I don't think so. Democrats might come a little bit close. They haven't won that since 1976, but I really don't see them winning that one. But remember that the 4 big states, California, New York, Florida and Texas, 4 biggest ones in population, and you need to win 2 of those to stand a significant chance of winning the election. If you win only one of the 3, then it's very hard to win overall. You need to win so many of the smaller states. And remember, a lot of states are just non-competitive, like Utah, rock solid Republican, the most Republican state of all, elected Trump by a huge margin. whereas in some states are very Democrat. I mean, obviously California goes to the Democrats, not even by that huge a margin, but it's very hard to see how it's going to go for Republican ever, especially these days with the demographic shift, with the browning of America, with more and more ethnic minority people. So 46% of people voted for Trump last time. 43% of Americans are whites without a degree. Let's say the working class then. There's this myth. They've tricked a lot of people believing they're middle class when they're not. They're working class. Nothing to be ashamed of, but they almost never mentioned, because working class, I suppose, means poor. The euphemism was used by Obama, those struggling to get into the middle class, but they're not all bourgeoisie. Surely not. Even some graduates aren't. So, Republican support and the number of whites who are working class is very close to each other. But that 43%, that's dipping, not very fast, but and the lower that goes, the worse it's going to be with Republicans. Of course, not all people who vote Republican are working class whites. Have some middle class whites, have people who are not white who vote for Republicans, but not so much. And isn't it telling that the more educated you are, the less likely you are to vote for the Republicans and their irrational, regressive, and pernicious policies? Well, that's my penny's worth. I think Trump has got a serious chance, but as I say, I think almost all the indicators are that Biden's going to make it, not by much. I'm slightly worried about bogus voting allegations by the Trump campaign, by some Democrats' votes being discounted, by doing everything they can to obstruct the vote, impeding people in the exercise of their constitutional rights in casting a ballot for the candidate of their choice. And the inane remarks by Meghan Markle might have even worked to the disadvantage of the Democrats, because she's seen as such an insufferable lovey that an endorsement by her, and it was a tacit one, would be a Judas kiss in the eyes of much of middle America. Yeah, I think that Trump will be sent packing. He'll probably deny it. The trouble is, will some Republican states register a Trump victory when it's not in their state? Will there be faithless electors on the Electoral College that meets about a month after polling day, cast a ballot for Trump? But not all of them have criminal sanctions for those who do so. So we live in interesting times. It's nerve-wracking. Okay, Trump could win. I mean, the good news is, obviously, Democrats have got the House of Representatives. They're likely to increase their hold on that. It's not a very strong hold, and there's quite a good chance they'll take hold of the Senate, actually, as well. Some Republicans are worried that Trump's going to affect them down ballot. But then again, they did say that last time. So there we go. He might even win, but if he's lost both houses, he's really hemmed in. There's less he can do. Remember, that happened to Obama in the last few years of his rule. Moreover, lots of investigations can be opened. If Trump is kicked out, he's worried it's going to be jail time. That's talking about leaving the country, which again is richly ironic for someone who hates immigration. He wants to be an immigrant himself because of all his rampant criminality. And I really hope it leads to the annihilation of the Republican Party. Trouble is, I think that's highly improbable. Well, thank you. Please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and so on. Please donate to me on PayPal and Patreon. I urgently need donations to sustain the channel. On PayPal, I'm georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Callahan is spelled Callallagan. Okay, toodaloo.